My name is Sam Fletcher. I am the Executive Director for the New York State chapter of NASW. I want to thank you for joining us. As always, this event and all of our Revolutionize is free and open to social workers around the world. We want you here. We want you part of this conversation. We need you part of the conversation. So you're welcome and thank you, and keep putting where you're from in the chat. And also thank you to those who are putting the link for Facebook in the chat, because I don't know how to do that. So I saw you asking and I can't do it. So thank you. We do have Taj Tournier, who is one of our interns who is on Facebook Live, and she will be the go-between for Facebook Live and our chat. So if someone says something on there, Taj might pop up and let us know what's going over on Facebook Live. So thank you, Taj. So I just want to talk a few minutes about the goal of Revolutionize. Amelia told you how it started and how we do it, but our goal is to change the social work profession and to make it a racially just profession. We can keep talking about the insidious nature of racism and how race shows up and how it impacts people, or we can do something about it. And that's what we're doing. We're going to do something about it. It's going to take a long time. Change is hard. People don't like change. It's going to take a lot of work, and we are committed. At the New York State chapter, we are committed. We understand that it's going to take years to get there, but we're going to keep going and we're going to keep plugging away, and we want you to join us on this. We are actually going to start our work groups very soon, most likely in February, for the goals for the schools of social work. Our Revolutionize Leadership Team has been meeting regularly, and we have one more meeting before we will send out emails to the BIPOC social workers who have been interested in being part of those work groups. And then we're going to call a meeting with you so we can divide tasks. And then we're going to invite our white allies in to help do the work in the work groups under the leadership of BIPOC social workers. Everything in the revolution is led by BIPOC social workers. So I just want to let you know that's coming soon. So what does a racially just social work profession look like? That's part of what the goals are going to tell us, but I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few days. And for me, it looks like I'm going to glance down at notes because it was so important. I was like, I'm going to write this down. I don't want to forget anything. So for me, when I envision it, I see BIPOC social workers represented at every level of social work, in organizations and in schools of social work. I see those BIPOC social workers having pay equity with their white counterparts. I see BIPOC social work voices not only leading organizations and being heard at organizations, but being valued at organizations. I see BIPOC clients treated with dignity and respect and given the same benefit of the doubt that many of our white clients are given. I also see BIPOC culture integrated into treatment. So Black, Indigenous, communities of color, what they've been doing for generations and thousands of years to heal their own communities, I see that being part of social work practice and not only using white interventions and whitewashed interventions. What it also means is the elimination of white privilege. And this is work that we can start doing now. So a lot of times I will have white social workers reach out and say, how can I start doing this work now? First of all, start with some self-reflection, but you can start speaking out right now. So you're in places of work. When you have a staff meeting, who is sitting at the table? Is it only white people at the table? If it is, why? Ask. Be the person who asks that question. Why are there only white people here? If it's not just white people and you have BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, social workers of color at the table, are their voices heard? Are they listened to? Are they leading the meetings? Are they valued in the meetings? If they're not, speak up, call that out. Also, who has privilege of emotion? Who's able to get angry in meetings? Who's able to put ideas up in meetings? These are things you can start calling out now. How do your coworkers speak about clients of color? How do they talk about, what's the language they use? Because I've heard the language. Are we calling that out? When they refer to our Black, Indigenous, our Latinx communities, our Asian communities, when they refer to them in derogatory terms or terms of giving up, are you calling them out? Do that. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Are you going to have conflict? Probably. But this is how you start to make change now. And it's important that we start the work now. And I just want to use one phrase that Eddie, who joins us in the revolution all the time, used last time. He used the phrase, to amplify Black liberation over white comfort. That's what I'm asking you to do. That's what I'm asking, that's part of the revolution, is to do that. And here's the thing, we can control our profession, social work. That's what we're working to change, is our own profession and to hold our own profession to account. The good news is our profession is spread throughout society. We are in almost every workplace you can imagine, social workers are. So once we start to change our profession, we can start to impact several other populations, workplaces, systems, and structures. So that's the work we're doing. I'm so happy you've joined us. And I did ask our leadership team if it would be appropriate if I end with a little bit of the poem that we heard yesterday from Amanda Gorman, who was clearly the winner during the inauguration, and just a brilliant poet. She did the impossible and made me like poetry. So I'm just going to end with a little bit of her poem and then hand it over to our amazing facilitators. By the way, I apologize because I cannot do it justice. I would just like to have like her pinky toe worth of poise, but I'm going to do my best. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame, and unafraid, the new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. So now I'm going to hand it over to two people who are it, who are the light, Cecily and Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Samantha and Amelia, for the background, the context, and also thank you for that poem. I just want to say that poem yesterday was like the highlight of the inauguration. So I am Cecily Mitchell Harper, and I'm really, really excited to be here. I've been participating in a number of these town halls so far, and they have just been, I have to say, a really, really good space to just talk, to be able to see ourselves as change agents. And I'm inspired. When I'm a part of this group, I'm really inspired. So I just have to say that. But I'm a healing facilitator and coach and a strategic advisor, and have been facilitating some of these town halls now for the past several months. As Amelia said, we've been actually having this since I think last summer. So it's been a while, and we still have quite a ways to go. So I am really excited to be here. Last time, back in December before the holidays, we started having a discussion about how racism shows up in social work practice settings, both on a micro scale and a more macro scale. So this evening's session will continue in the same theme, and we'll focus specifically looking at racism within clinical practice and clinical encounter with clients. So we're really going to be thinking about, in clinical practice and in clinical encounter with clients, what happens, how that plays out, and also, do we have support? What type of support, if any, do we receive from our colleagues, from our supervisors, from higher ups within the organization and practice? So those are the conversations that we'll be having this evening. As always, you know, we always end up talking about a number of different things that relate, so that's totally fine. We always appreciate a rich dialogue, and as Samantha said, this really does lead to goal setting and really helping us to prepare ourselves for the working groups that are coming up. Now I'm going to turn it over to Caroline so she can introduce herself as well.
Welcome everybody. My name's Caroline Brown. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I want to thank everybody for participating, for being here, for leaning into this conversation, which can be very uncomfortable at times. But I want to thank you all for your courage, your bravery. I want to thank everybody who has reached out to NASW and NYS chapter through IG, through Facebook, through emails. we are really looking at our profession to revolutionize our practice. We live and we operate in a system that treats people differently. I want you to all know that, rest assured that tonight is not about putting any individual social worker or agency on blast. Systematic racism has implications for our profession. We're not pointing to individual white social workers who are racist or who deliberately try to shortchange their clients. What we're talking about is that social work needs to be seen in the wider wider structural context in our Western world. The hard truth is that social work contributes towards discrimination, oppression, the wider framework that reflects power, white privilege. And I have to say, as much as I'm full of hope, I am thinking about Daniel Prude in Rochester, the young man who, mentally ill Black man who, when his family, called for help from the police, died, at the hands of police. I'm thinking about Miss Anjanette Young, clinical social worker in Chicago, who finished her day of work and was sitting at home undressed, and her home was raided by the police, and she was handcuffed, she was naked, and she had guns, drawn at her. I am thinking about those situations. These are the things that are on my mind. These are the things that I feel that we need to just understand, that we are talking about systemic, racism. And I also feel that I need to, talk about the fact that racism operates via acts of omission as well as commission. So not being aware of the problem is not an excuse or a valid response. Racism is a powerful force in society. It subjects one portion of society, BIPOC, to oppression, degradation, discrimination on the grounds that they are deemed to be inferior by virtue of biology or culture to the white majority. And so this has a major implication to social work in terms of policies, our theory-based practice, training and recruitment and management. And so, these are the things that are on my mind. These are the things I know that are on your minds. And I really want us to have an open discussion about how we can really impact our profession, because we care about our profession, we care about our clients. And, systemic racism affects everything that we do in terms of treatment and providing clinical intervention. So, Cecily, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Caroline. And we are going to stop speaking very, very shortly, because we do want to hear, from you. This is a discussion, this is a dialogue, so we don't want to, talk for the entire time. But thank you, Caroline, for sharing your thoughts and for just providing a context for us as we engage in this discussion. Couple of pieces that Caroline mentioned about confidentiality. We are not naming individual agencies. We're not obviously naming clients, colleagues, etc. We are keeping this confidential. We're going to be talking about themes. And you can speak to your experience, but please do not obviously disclose any confidential personal information. So just wanted to say that. And then before we get started, I always like to, as Caroline said, and as Samantha said, these can potentially be difficult conversations. And sometimes when we're engaging in difficult conversations, we may find ourselves getting triggered or, having a reaction. And that's totally normal. But we want to acknowledge that. And I always like to begin by creating a space for us first to set an intention for ourselves for how we want to show up in this space. So I'm going to ask you, you don't have to say it, you don't have to write in the chat. It's just basically for you to take a few seconds to set an intention for yourself for how you want to show up in this space. So for example, it could be, I want to listen deeply. If you're one of the folks who have been asked to listen, right? That's a form of participation. So listening deeply is part of dialogue. Or I want to lean into discomfort. I want to speak up. However, I'm going to say for myself, I want to listen deeply. That is my intention. I encourage you now to take a few seconds to just think about and reflect on an intention that you have for this conversation this evening. Okay. All right. And then also, as I mentioned, these times, thank you for that. Thank you for participating in that. And also, as I mentioned, these conversations can potentially be triggering, can potentially be challenging. So I do encourage you, if you need to take time out for yourself, part of having these conversations, part of engaging in this type of process is knowing when we need to take a step back, knowing when we need to take a step forward, but also knowing when we need to take a step back. So I encourage you, if at any point during this conversation, you need to take a step back, whether that's taking yourself off camera, just, you know, stopping engaging in the chat, whatever that is, I encourage you, we all have to take care of ourselves in this process as we continue to take care of each other and listen to each other. Okay, I am going to stop there and I'm going to open it up by having the first prompt. I want to highlight something that I saw actually come up in the chat previously from Mimi, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, mentioned something about not just talking about, our, instances of racism directed towards us as BIPOC social workers, but also how it impacts clients. So definitely there is a space to talk about that. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's a conversation that we started having at the last session, and obviously we'll continue this session. So thank you. I just wanted to highlight that we're not excluding that is absolutely part of the conversation. So the first prompt is, please share any personal experiences of engaging in conversations about race with clients, or personal instances of racist actions, what we call microaggressions, which I actually don't really like that term because they're actually not micro, but from clients directed towards you. And we're asking specifically BIPOC social workers who have experience working directly with clients in a variety of different settings, can be children, can be adults, whatever, and what that experience is, if you want to speak to that. And also we have some other further questions down the line about support as well. And as we begin, I would like to ask Liz to speak. I know she has a story that she wanted to share to help start this conversation.
This social work practice does have a role in challenging racist comments, attitudes, actions, behaviors, creating anti-racist alliances. And it's, I mean, I thank you for your bravery. I thank you for being here. I thank you for speaking up. And I saw in the comments, wow, as you were speaking, but, your story is not uncommon, and that's the sad thing. And I am not sure, whether, I'm not sure whether our white counterparts know just how, devastating it is to be working in an atmosphere, working in an environment where we are choosing to help our clients and advocate for them, and can also, be treated in this way, and have it, be a devastating obstacle in our careers. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Liz. I just want to second what everyone is saying. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your bravery. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for speaking truth, and for really, I think, not just sharing your personal story, but highlighting how this relates to larger systemic issues, right? So just thank you so much for that. Thank you for opening the conversation with that. Just a few points, and then I know that we have some folks who raised their hands, so I want to get to them as well. Just some things that stuck out to me as you were speaking about neutrality, what neutrality means when we say, just be neutral. We just have to maintain a neutral stance. There is no neutral stance. There is no objective stance. That is rooted in whiteness. And actually objective means white stance. Neutral means white stance. It's just not named because whiteness goes unnamed, but it's rooted in whiteness. So I just wanted to highlight that. The other thing is violence. I just read an article the other day about forms of violence. And in this country, we think of violence as just physical violence, physical attacks. But violence, there can be emotional violence. There can be, spiritual violence. Violence can happen on multiple levels. And when we think about racism, racism is inherently violent. Whether or not you're being attacked from a police officer on the ground, to if you're having a conversation with someone who makes you feel unsafe and is triggering you and is saying something that's very, very harmful, that is violent as well. So thank you for highlighting that and for referencing that as well. Those are just some things that came to mind and just struck out to me as you were speaking. Thank you again, Liz, for opening this conversation and for your bravery. I see two hands. I'm not sure if they were up before or I'm just seeing them now. Sonia and Stephanie. I'm not sure if you wanted to speak or you can speak to this experience, or if anybody wants to, share anything that struck out to them as Liz was speaking, feel free, or anybody want to share their own personal experience. Then we open that floor to you as well. So Sonia and Stephanie, and I also see I have a hand up from Mike as well.
And me, I don't know how to put the damn thing up.
Hello. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
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 Okay. I was trying to get to the buttons. So basically, I am a social worker working with the aging population. And one of the things that I have noticed is kind of within some of my communities, I've gone to homes that have Confederate flags outside. And I've also had people refuse. They were Confederate flags. Why is that a problem? They have a right to request certain aids. They have a right, to request services.
Perhaps commenting without video might have a clear connection.
Can I try until she reconnects?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Feel free. Yeah. It looks like she may have
Okay.
stuck out. Yeah.
Thank you. So this is Sonia Hunter. I work for community mental health, and I live in the South. So again, as what she was ascribing to say with the Confederate flag and just a lot of clients with, just racial discrimination and, derogatory statement and names that, I've been called. And when I brought it to, the detention of the director, you had at a roundtable meeting, within weeks, I found myself fired. So, because I am that person that will say, well, why are there no, Black supervisors, or, why are there no Black people that have leadership positions here? And it's gotten me to a place where the very profession that I love, I am now beginning to despise, because it's like, how can I advocate for a client if I'm not allowed to advocate for self? And advocating for self, as the prior, clinician has stated, has caused me to lose my job. And so I'm struggling with that, as I'm sure that many are. I find that many people just kind of just tuck the tail, and they say, well, we live in the South, and this is just, the way it is. But that's not my philosophy. So I'm trying to find a way to overcome that mountain, to say, look, you are being racist. Look, you are being discriminatory. Look, the white girl that you hired to be a part of crisis intervention to go in the field with us, oh, she doesn't do that anymore because you say every time it's time to go on a call, you got a special project for her. Oh, if we're having a staff meeting, oh, the white people can voice their feelings openly, but the Black people can't. And so I'm struggling with that. I'm needing help with that part of it.
Thank you, Sonia. I mean, you make a really good point. It's just not something that is happening over there, or is happening in the South, or it's in the city, or it's upstate. It is a system. And
Yes.
so, having managers, having supervisors who are willing to put this on the agenda, to look at it in terms of assessment when we're working with our patients, our clients, because it forms the whole context of working with that family, with the Confederate flag. It's about, having these conversations, being able to discuss this in team meetings, to address the clinical issues behind it. And so, I think it's a really good, important point that you're making, is that it's often the BIPOC social workers who are bringing this up time and time again, whereas, it should be something that we're looking at it, within our whole entire, agency, like within our team. We hear about treatment planning, right? And that golden thread. Well, looking at, discrimination, looking at racism, looking at, how, systemic racism affects our clients is part of that context, is part of that golden thread. So it's not about, just saying, well, that's over there, that's not happening here.
Well, no, I certainly believe that is happening across the United States, of America. And I'm a part of many groups, and I see that, more and more African American clinicians are saying enough. Let me just open my own practice, and just be done with, the entire hypocrisy of that. It's a total insult to me. It's an insult to the population that I serve. Even when I was calling out the injustice and partiality on the way that we serve our white and our Black clients, it's like, how dare you, call us out, and saying that we're being, partial and discriminatory on even serving our clients. So again, part of that self-care and that awareness for self, you say, well, this is what's happening. I can have this conversation with another clinician just to check my self-awareness. And then when you bring it to, the supervisory level, they say, I hear you. And then before you know it, then you got this trail of paperwork that's now following you. And now before you know it, you're fired. So it makes it hard to advocate, as I said, for your client, the very thing that brought you, to social work, when you cannot advocate for yourselves. The guiding principles and ethics of social work that guide our practice doesn't always apply to the employer that you work for.
Thank you.
But thank you for allowing me to express that, because I felt like I held that since August, which is when I was terminated, prior, I got much accolades. Oh, you're so good. We got clients calling here asking for you, but when I called them out, on some things, then I got a list of things why I was no longer a competent clinician. Yeah.
Sonia, thank you so much for sharing. And I appreciate your bravery and courage to share. And also just know that this is the space to share, right? We're sharing our stories, and these are part of larger trends. Unfortunately, these are not isolated incidents. They're part of larger trends. They impact us individually in a very deep level, but they also impact us systemically. So thank you for speaking to that.
I'm so glad you guys have this, because that I've been holding that in my head and in my heart and in my spirit.
Well,
and so I needed to relieve myself of that.
I am glad that this was a space for you to relieve and release.
Yes, yes.
So thank you. I do know that I have we have several people who have raised their hand, which is great. So I want to get to everyone. I didn't know, I know Stephanie was speaking before and she kind of, clicked out. So I don't know if Stephanie is back and wants to finish what she was saying, or we can just, we do have other people who did raise their hand as well. So I want to get to them as well. But I did want to just highlight Stephanie because I know she spoke before.
Yes, I am back. I must have had a bad connection. But to what Sonia was saying, that is, again, what you deal with, especially working in rural areas. I work in a rural area. I am the only person of color at my agency. So when I bring things to the light on, why it is fearful for me to go to a home that you see a Confederate flag raised, or fearful, with people who, are openly basically saying that they don't like you because of the color of your skin, and not seeing yourself represented in that organization is very difficult. And I feel like, not to speak up and not to say something is an injustice. But then again, like Sonia said, she lost her job for speaking up. And so that's where I find myself in my organization. I do push the envelope, but you don't want to push too far, especially when you have a family to feed. And I think that is an injustice in and of itself, because you are stuck between a rock and a hard place of trying to keep your job, but also trying to get justice for yourself and for others coming up behind you. So that's all I wanted to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, so I'm just going to go down the list. So I see Felix, Jamelin, I may not be pronouncing your name properly. I'm sorry about that. Mike, Monica, Robert, Courtney, Joetta, Yvette, and Shakira. If we could start with Felix, I'm just writing down who I see came up first in terms of my chat function. So if we could start with Felix, and then we will move on from there.
All right, hi, I'm Felix, and my perspective is largely from the student perspective. I'm about to graduate with my MSW in May. I'm super excited. But something that I've noticed as someone who also works in diversity and equity and inclusion, things like that outside of social work, that our programs that we're supposed to be preparing our new generation of social workers fail miserably to have a approach that is intersectional. And I'm really disappointed in it. A couple things that I can share is, even in my bachelor's social work program, I had a fight with a professor, like in class, because he taught strengths perspective and oppression and privilege in the same class, and said that you can use someone's privileges as a strength. And I tried to clarify, like, so a white man, you can use his whiteness as a strength. And I tried to argue all of the things that I had just learned as a bachelor, student about, the ethics and how that's actually like actively oppressing people of color when you uplift people's privileges. And this is a thing that he was like, well, we can have two different opinions on this. But I'm like, no, we can't have two different opinions on this. You're an educator telling people that it's okay to uplift someone's privileges when we're trying to actually remove that kind of stuff. And I did not really have any support in the school about this at all. He's definitely still an educator, all of that stuff. We don't have any kind of diversity class. We have one that is, optional to take, which if you miss it that one semester, you can't take it for the rest of your master's program. And that's really, really unfortunate because every student needs to get this. Same thing with sexual identity. I'm very disappointed in the curriculum because it doesn't give racial justice enough credit or focus to the point where, like, I've had supervisors in my internship who I've had to educate them, like white women who are colorblind, and say like, well, I just don't see color, and then I have to sit there, like, use my own supervision time to educate them about queerness, about racial justice, about all of these things that, as a student learner, it is not my job to do that. As a person of color, it is not my job to do that. And I have to use my time and energy that I'm supposed to use being educated to educate. And I just really feel like I missed that opportunity. And I have classmates who openly say things. I just don't feel like oppression and privilege are relevant to social work. And they are allowed to graduate like that. And it leaves me deeply, deeply scared for my profession, because social workers historically and currently still traumatize folks of color all the time. And it really, really frustrates me. I'm pushing back against school all the time. Like, I'm very, very active. Like, the dean knows me, kind of thing. And I just wish that she didn't have to know me. That is how I feel about that. And lastly, we don't talk about the ways that our techniques in social work that we say are great actually can really oppress folks. Like, for example, things like CBT are a great way to racially gaslight folks. Like, white therapists can sit in a session and hear their Black clients say something like, I'm afraid of the cops. And then they can be like, what's the evidence for that? Like, and do all of these CBT things. That is black and white thinking. That's generalizations. And now you're using things that we've been taught in social work classes, all of these techniques, to just racially gaslight our clients. And white people don't even realize they're doing it. And it just feels like we don't do enough in our foundational education classes to fight against that kind of thing. So I'm very, very concerned about the social work profession. I'm very proud to be here, and I'm proud social worker, whatever. Like, I'm really excited to have my master's, and I see all of these issues that need to be really targeted and tackled right now on an institutional level. So that's just how I feel about that. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Felix.
Felix, thank you, thank you, thank you. We've had previous discussions that specifically dealt with racism that comes up and how that shows up in social work schools of education, in classrooms, in classroom settings, and internships. So thank you, because you're just highlighting again, unfortunately, what is happening, what's so prevalent, and as well as what shows up in clinical settings as well. So thank you, Felix, congratulations. And next, I want to call on Mike, because I know he's had his hand up. And everybody who has your hand up, I see you. You will get a chance to speak. So just, we will all get to you. But I did want to call on Mike next, since I know he had his hand up for quite a long time.
Yes,
So,
good
Mike?
evening. Greetings. Yeah, good evening. Greetings, salutations. And let's remember, today is a good day to be a social worker. Today is. We've chose a profession that nobody else will or can't do. And we're doing the work on the ground. And let's remember that, despite our challenges. Secondly, I wanted to, the reason I jumped on the Zoom is because I kind of wanted to share some of my own lived experience as a social worker. 25-year plus social worker with Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services, field social worker. So I'm coming from a non-clinical background. Secondly, within those years, I probably experienced one instance of racism, because initially when I started in August of '93, I was with a program called the Black Family Investment Project. That's when family preservation funds was really prevalent. You know, each administration brings on another host of funding, Title 42 funding, and you know, we get it as Black grants out here in California. Well, prior to that, LA County can be just as much or more inherently racist than the South, believe it or not. Secondly, the racism didn't come from a client, it came from a CASA. And I'm ambivalent about CASAs, you know, anyway, but you know, sometimes their background doesn't allow them to identify with what we're doing. And so we had a family meeting, well, not a family meeting, but the current caregiver wanted to adopt. And so the current caregiver was African American. She had adopted other African American children, but the CASA and the child attorney were meeting, and the CASA was, you know, her voice carried. So I was right outside the door, and so the thing is, I heard every other word, you know, not Black but Negro, and I said okay. And so she continues, and so of course I kind of knew where that was going, and so finally when we all met up again, immediately. And this is something you have to remember. Sometimes when you cross that threshold, you have to leave your personal issues, concerns, or even your own self-advocacy at the door. I had to maintain my professionalism despite the fact that someone kind of already outed themselves. She had an issue with the child being adopted because he was white. He had Duchenne's muscular dystrophy and all kind of other things. So she was Caucasian, young man was white, and she fought against this as a CASA. So she was turning other reports outside of my own court report. So clients, since we work with a largely Black and brown population, there were other instances of maybe, you know, heritage or culture, sometimes classism, but that came from CASA. And my last piece is that I was in a seminary prior to being a social worker. So it was easy for me to transition to social work. But the thing is, when I look back, I'm doing consulting now. When I look back, I wouldn't trade it for the world. We have to make sure that despite folks we don't particularly care for, or ones that have an opinion, we have to take it in stride. There's some other things that may come up, you have to deal with it. But our profession sometimes is like a microcosm of the United States and other parts of the country. So keep your head up. And here's other thing that I want to share. I'm a board member with the National Association of Black Social Workers. We had parted ways with NASW back in '68 for the very same reasons. Now things have progressed, but we're getting to the point where we're trying to institute a lot more Afrocentric based curriculum. You know, we're trying to work with the Council of Social Work Education, NASW, and we've had some dialogues, some positive dialogues. So a lot of times in respect to that's what we're working on, but sometimes there also needs to be trainings and other things that, not just for white people, but just, you know, folks in general that don't understand the culture, because you can live in a castle and really not understand what the struggle is. And you don't want to necessarily have a person that's vanished. You know, we all have to be brought to the point where we're all on the same page. We may not like each other. We have to respect each other and respect each other professionally when it comes to ourselves and to our clients. Thank you.
Yeah, self-reflection is important. It's part of the work that we do.
Thank you, Mike, for speaking to that. And I also want to now go to Jamelin, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I did see your, or Jamie I did see your hand
there
up
you
as
go.
well. Yes, Jamie, got it.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. My name is Jamie Fowler. I am a social worker in South Carolina. I work in community mental health. I'm also an advocate for reparations for the American descendants of slavery. I have been working to advocate for reparations, which includes, speaking with local and national politicians, speaking to a number of different political leaders and political pundits and political candidates throughout the election season, this past election season. I have to say that it is I was very disappointed when I saw very minimal input on the issue of reparations from the NASW, particularly with reparations with regards to the American descendants of slavery. I have reached out to various members at the national level of the NASW, and there is very minimal input or very minimal advocacy on that national level. A couple of statistics. Black Americans, American descendants of slavery, are 13 to 14% of the population, yet we own 2.6% of the wealth in this nation, with the vast majority of that wealth in the hands of boomers. The bottom half of Black America has less than $1 of wealth. We talk about a number of different policies, which is fine. A major issue is the lack of wealth in our communities, and that is reflected in our communities when we have groups of us who are absolutely powerless to do anything that happens to our communities, such as what's going on in Flint, Michigan. We have very little political influence because we have very little wealth to influence the politics at the local, state, and national level. Another issue I have with the NASW, and I'm speaking for personal, I'm sorry, I don't mean to go off on a tangent. I'm speaking from a personal experience as somebody who advocates for this stuff. I saw recently on LinkedIn where the National Association of Social Workers, the NASW, had congratulated or was, I guess, in so many words, elated about the election of Joe Biden as president of the United States. So wait a minute. Joe Biden is in so many ways one of the architects of mass incarceration that has impacted Black communities, particularly ADOS communities, for decades. So what is the NASW, at least on the national level, doing congratulating this man, especially with the fact that he's not given any policy to correct what he's done for the past 40 to 50 years as a senator? Let's take it deeper. His vice president is Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, who, as a district attorney, whose policies has impacted the lives of Black people, particularly Black women, through her truancy policies and through her own policies in mass incarceration at the local level, has impacted Black people. So let's think about this stuff for a minute. Why is the NASW not holding these people's feet to the fire? Where is the policy to change all this? Why is the NASW not advocating for the policy to make this happen or to change this stuff? Furthermore, we talk about reparations. We talk about where's the Black agenda? Where's the agenda that is specific to the American descendants of slaves who helped to build this country? I'm reading a book right now, and I don't know if any other people have read this book. I don't know if you can see it or not. The Half That Has Never Been Told. If you've read that book, you know there is a lot of traumatic stuff that's talked about in this book. And look at the subtitle, Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism. That's the subtitle of the book. All right. I'm extremely disappointed in the fact that the NASW has not done enough to advocate for an ADOS agenda specifically, and in generally speaking, a Black agenda. And I'm very disappointed that when I try to go out and advocate for reparations, I get very little support and even some pushback from other social workers and other people in the social work field at a more local level, and then even at a larger level, NASW at the national level itself. So my biggest issue, where is the policy to make the lives of the American descendants of slavery, whose ancestors built this country and made this country the richest country in the history of this planet? Where is advocacy for this group? Where is the policy or the advocacy or the questions or the request for policy to change our lives? Flint, Michigan is 60% of Black Americans. Why are they still living with poisoned water? I can go on a tangent, but I apologize. I don't mean to go off, but I'll leave it at that. But if there's any other questions or anything else, I'll be glad to answer it.
Jamie, and I don't think I can answer your question or do it justice, but I do want to say that I don't believe social work is any more racist than any other institution here in this nation. And I do want to speak to the fact that the backdrop is 400 years of slavery.
Saying that they wouldn't let them say anything.
400 years of slavery. I also want to say, I want to say something about Dr. King.
First Black.
Dr. King's diagnosis of America is that America never really fully kind of rid itself of that original violation of chattel slavery, right? So, I mean, this is the backdrop. This is the context of social work and institutions, right? This is what we're talking about. And so we're having these conversations today to talk about, how to really revolutionize our profession and to incorporate the damage of racism, which impacts BIPOC and white social workers. Racism is damaging. It's traumatizing. It's traumatizing to everybody. And so that is what we're doing. That's what we're starting to do here in this chapter, is to have these very difficult conversations. And so I want to thank you, Jamie,
Can I just quickly respond to that? Let me just say this, and I'll be brief. Look, and what I'm about to say is almost kind of controversial, and I understand that. I don't particularly care for what a person thinks about me personally. I've been pretty good about navigating people's personal views in regards to race and racism and their personal prejudices and preferences. What I care about is, what is the government going to do to limit that person's ability to harm me or inhibit my life or quality of life so I can operate and achieve the American dream? What a person on the corner or what a person somewhere in South Carolina feels about me, their personal opinion means very little to me. I just don't want them to be able to harm me and get away with it. And that's up to the government to make sure that policies are implemented and put in place to keep that from happening. I'll keep it at that. I'll stop there because I know other people want to talk.
Damien, thank you for speaking. And you're speaking to so many issues and how it all relates together, capitalism and NASW. And I mean, we're talking about clinical practice, but it always relates. There is really no distinction between clinical practice and micro because it all relates. Social work practice infuses many different settings. So we're speaking to all of this. So thank you for highlighting your perspective. Next, I do see hands continuing to go up. Monica, and then we're going to go to Robert, and then see other hands, but we're going to get to all of you. I want to go to Monica, and then we'll go to Robert.
Well, thank you all for having this space for us to come together and start these conversations. I told people last month's discussion was like a revival for me. I felt like I had been to a good Baptist church when I left the meeting. So I was very excited to come tonight and listen and engage. And then I was excited at the title. You know, just because you are in social work doesn't mean you can't be racist. And I was so excited to see that, because I feel like there is this notion that somehow social work is this magic profession and we will just love everyone and we're just open and yada, yada, yada. As powerful as social work is, unfortunately, it's not at a place where it's more powerful than racism or white supremacy. As I've read in the chat, and as people have said in our conversation, this country was built on these two things. And I think one of the problems is when we think of racism and white supremacy, we have them so tightly together, we treat them like they're one concept, and they're not. White supremacy is an ideology, whereas racism is more of your thoughts and ideology in action, where you're actively oppressing someone. What I mean by that is when you think about the social work profession, one of the things that struck me with Liz's story was her part about the ASWB question. If a client presents with racism, basically, that you keep your opinion to yourself. So as a body, as a profession, as social workers, we're saying racism is horrible. It's a scourge in our society. We need to get rid of it. But our actions and our policies and our tests evidently don't support that, because take out racism from that test question and put in, your client reports that they're abusing their child. Your client reports that they're engaging in substance abuse. Your client reports that they have suicidal ideation. You wouldn't just ignore those things. Those are social problems that we want to address. But yet, when racism is the social problem that's in the test question, well, you just need to ignore that and keep your opinion to yourself. That's absurd, but it's an example of how white supremacy and that ideology is guiding our profession. Because like I said last month, white supremacy and ideology is not just the Confederate flag and Bubba in the pickup truck. It is the way we think and the way we support things. And as I was thinking, as Liz was talking, like, well, what's the difference between racism as a social problem and substance abuse, child abuse? Oh, child abuse is happening to white kids too. Substance abuse is happening to white people too. To Jamie's point, Joe Biden's policies didn't put a bunch of white people in jail. It put people of color in jail. So the social problems that are only specific to people of color, even though we talk about it and we get on our platforms and we join up with Black Lives Matter, et cetera, we are not putting it in we are not putting action behind that, because we're still continuing to treat it as a second class problem per se. The problem is, and then I'll be quiet, it's not a second class problem. It is the biggest problem that's driving all the other things. We will not get rid of poverty until we address racism. We will not get rid of people not being discriminated against at jobs, which contributes to poverty, or food insecurity, or substance abuse in neighborhoods that need to be addressed, until we address racism. But people of color didn't create racism. White people did. It was, the country was built on it. And until they are willing to put forth the effort and say, you know what? Yes, this does exist. Yes, I've benefited from it. Yes, I need to address it. I might not be a racist person who goes around and does these things, but on occasion, I can say something that might be construed as racism and not get your panties all in a bunch and want to argue and convince everyone that you're not racist, and just say, oh, I hadn't considered that. Let me think on that and do some self-reflection and get back to you or whatever. Until those types of things start to become in our everyday lives and our profession, there's going to be no change. I don't care what type of platforms we create or what type of memos we put out or national calls to action, because it starts within each one of us.
Thank you. If nothing changes, nothing changes, right? Thank you.
Monica, thank you. I'm going to say what other people have said. Take us to church. Yes, take us to church. Amen, amen, amen. Monica, thank you for speaking. Take us to church. All right. Continuing on, Robert.
Thank you for allowing me to be part of this group. And I have about 5 quick things I want to say. In regards to the 40 acres and a mule comment, that was Special Order 15 by William Sherman as he's going down and kicking Confederate butt in Georgia. And what happened with that is that when number 17 found out about it, he almost had an aneurysm and he revoked Special Order 15 by that William Sherman had, what actually giving people 40 acres and a mule, by taking the land from slave owners and giving it to the newly freed slaves. That's about that. Now, in regards to the crime bill, I looked through it all thoroughly, and there's several components to the crime bill, which is the assault weapons ban, the crime bill, the Women Against Violence Act, and so on and so forth. What people fail to forget though, is, or don't know, is that the majority of the Congressional Black Caucus voted for that crime bill. This was a bipartisan thing, very much veto-proof. So therefore, even if the president would have wanted to veto that, they had the power to override it. It was over 300 people co-sponsored that particular bill in the House, and 93 U.S. senators also signed on that. But I'm done with that. Now I want to talk about the couple of experiences I had, one as an intern and one as a functional MSW. When I was an MSW intern, I had a supervisor, I don't know if she had a problem with the fact that I was a male in a female dominated profession, or I was able to stand up for myself, or the fact that she knew I was going to be going for my license at some point because she was an MSW, but she was my supervisor, which I still can't wrap my head around that. But it seemed like every time I went into her office for supervision, which is supposed to be a safe place, it wound up being the least safe space for me to be in. It got so bad at one point where she threatened not to pass me for my internship. And fortunately for me, I had a field supervisor who was African American, and I'm not going to tell you what she said in a particular language, but she basically, what's a metaphor, she can't effing fail you. And she kept repeating this particular thing that I should, the pottery something quote or something like that. That was her answer to everything. Now there was a particular case where I observed a patient being roughly handled. And next time I went back to see that patient was deceased. And so it really bothered me. So I went to doing supervision and I talked to her about it. And the first thing she said, hello? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. And the first thing she said is that, don't be going out to start no trouble. You're going to cause us to lose the contract. Hell with the contract. I'm supposed to be a mandated reporter. And so what I did is I did my due diligence and went and looked up the mandated report requirements in California. And it turns out I was right. I'm not mandated, but it's basically, it's part of best practice. I could be a mandated reporter. And it turns out that her boss got on her butt about that too later. But that was a real negative experience for me. Now, fast forward to actually working at a particular place, another MSW, supposed to LCSW, supervising me or providing me with supervision. She went off, started talking about, I kind of thought there was probably be a problem. She started telling me about the fact that referred to me as Afro-American. That's problematic to me too. And then she told me about a story about her mother and father were together, and that her father left her mother and her for Afro-American woman. Like I had anything to do with that. And eventually, I was wrongfully terminated. I had to wind up suing them for recovered wages, because not only did they fire me, they tried to prevent me from receiving unemployment benefits. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Robert, thank you for speaking to your experience. It's really troubling when I hear about people getting terminated from positions just for speaking up. It's a trend. Thank you for sharing. So much to say, but I want to get to other folks. So we're going to go with Courtney. I saw Courtney's hand up before. Is Courtney here? Okay. So next, Joetta.
Hi.
Hi, Joetta.
My name is Joetta, pronouns she, her, hers. Like Felix, I am also in my graduate program. I'm going to be graduating in July. I'm also getting my LADC, so I'm doing the dual mental illness, chemical dependency route, micro. So yeah, I think my experience is a little bit different from Felix, but also really similar. And I'm definitely coming from like the student's perspective. I go to Augsburg University and their program is absolutely amazing. We're working on really decolonizing all these different theories, looking at ways to implement these theories and really build anti-racist social work practice. And one thing that I'm really finding myself struggling with in school and then being in the field is just how a lot of my white classmates view anti-racism work in their practice. A lot of them don't even know what intersectionality is. A lot of them don't even understand how to implement anti-racism social work into their practice, and it's really frustrating. And so I find myself having to educate a lot more too in my classes, and I'm the student, I shouldn't be doing that. And I find myself also at my internship having to educate my supervisors on things that I shouldn't. It feels good, but at the same time, I shouldn't be doing that because that's how you contribute to the burnout rate. And so I think one really important thing to note here too is I like the fact that we're giving space to BIPOC people to speak about their experiences with anti-racist social work and how they've experienced racism in their field. But also too, I don't want to make white students too comfortable. I always say this all the time because I think it's easy to hide behind the fact of, okay, let BIPOC people have the stage and you guys listen, right? And I feel like that type of thinking or approach to it really gives white students like a safety net. So they don't have to feel uncomfortable in these conversations. So they don't have to engage much in these conversations. And so I think it's really important to note that. And then also too, just especially the biggest thing that I feel like I'm challenged with too is supervision. I do plan on getting my LCSW or LICSW. I live in Minnesota, and trying to find a supervisor is almost like 1 in a million. There's only, I think, 3 Black women social workers who actually are able to do supervision in the state of Minnesota. And the rest are white women. And I feel like it's so challenging to have a white woman supervisor because I find myself in the position of teaching a lot. And so this kind of goes back to, okay, we're having white people, listen to BIPOC people share their experiences and stuff like that. But it's like, how are you as a white person, as you're listening to all of us talk and share about our experiences, how are you taking in this information and going to apply it to your anti-racism work in the field, right? Because it's easy to sit back and be like, yeah, I heard this and I heard that and blah, 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 but how are you actually applying it? And I really want to see more conversations like this, but with white people holding each other accountable in the social work field, because I just don't think, how effective is it going to be for having BIPOC people share their opinions, share their views, share the things that they experienced, but then we get into the field, we're prepared, right? We do all the emotional work that we need to do, but then we're still going into the field with these white people who sat there and listened and did not apply any of what we were saying to their work. So that's all I have to say. Yeah.
Thank you, Joetta, for speaking to that. Two things that just struck me as you were speaking to kind of highlight some other pieces that we were talking about, both in this town hall and other town halls, how we're responsible for educating. That's not really part of our role, but then we inherently have to play the role of an educator on top of everything else that we need to do, whether that be in a clinical setting, whether that be in a professional, clinical setting, macro setting, or in school, right? Or in a classroom in internships. That we've talked about as emotional labor. That's more emotional labor that we're putting on ourselves. That's a burden for us as BIPOC social workers that, white social workers do not have to deal with. The other piece that I want to speak to is the role of our white social workers, right? What is the role? What do we need? How do we need them to show up? And what is their work that they need to do, right? When there's this space, there's spaces like this where BIPOC social workers come together and they speak to their experiences, but then there's also space for white, they have to do their own work. So thank you for speaking to that, because there's so many levels of this and it does come up. And then when you don't do your work, it's going to come up and it will impact your practice. So thank you for speaking to that. Next, want to get to Yvette, then we'll go to Shakira. All right, so not sure what's.
Maybe we'll go on to Shakira.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Shakira Kennedy. And so thank you for sharing this space. Based upon what Monica and Joetta talked about in terms of how can we include our white social work counterparts, because I do agree with what they're saying. It's not Black people who are responsible for ending racism, it's really white people, right? So, because this also feels like another Black tax, right? That we are putting on BIPOC people. So I just wanted to sort of speak to that. With all of the trauma that's been said tonight, I just wanted to sort of speak to maybe having more healing spaces for support for clinicians who have been dealing with the significant amount of trauma. So whether it's the trauma of invisibility or the trauma of anti-Blackness or the trauma of white supremacy, and how can we essentially ensure that people are safe when they're entering dangerous places, such as the educational system, the work environment, or other social environments. So that's one. In addition, how can we begin to emerge as gatekeepers for the profession, right? I love that we have a lot of these talks, people are talking, we're sharing, but how do we essentially begin to move to the next level, and what should that look like, right? So they're gatekeepers in education or in academia that really sort of toe the line, and it's hard for Black academics or Black professors to get tenure, right? Because they're the gatekeeper, they're, you know, holding that line. And how can we, as social workers who are interested in this work, begin to emerge as gatekeepers for this profession, or gatekeepers to for accountability, right, around the work of anti-oppression. It also helps me, this discussion helps me to also think about just being more conscious in terms of an organization, National Association of, whether it's social work on the state level or the city level, you know, using our collective power to either be at the table or creating our own spaces, right, to tackle oppressive policies. So it's clear that this issue is a multi-pronged issue, whether it's education, making sure that education is, you know, that's something that needs to be ongoing. And you know, I oftentimes hear about canceling culture, right? Oh, these people got it wrong, let's cancel them. But is there an opportunity for redemption and for people to sort of essentially, I've learned, how can I now begin to redeem myself to do something very different? I see the error of my ways. And so I just want to sort of speak to that. We really need to be careful about canceling people, right? When people may not have known and or need to learn. And how can we, you know, give ourselves to this work, you know, in a way that we are really beginning to touch the next generation, right? If we're wanting to stop this, then how can we ensure that everyone is at this table doing that work? So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Shakira. Thanks. Oh man, I could go on. I could, but I want to make sure I see some other hands have gone up, so I want to keep this conversation going. So next I have Mimi, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but.
Hello, hi everybody. So I first want to say thank you even for like having this platform, for so many of us to just talk about things that we've experienced. It almost is like I feel like I should pay you, because it's very therapeutic for us as social workers of color. I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold right now, but I just wanted to say, just an experience that I had in my undergraduate. I'm currently in my doctorate, in my DSW program, but it's been a challenge matriculating all the way through as a Black woman of color. I think that I've not really dealt with, most of my clients are white. It's not really come from my clients. It really has come from interacting with my colleagues, supervisors. That's mostly where just dealing with those, like she said, and we shouldn't use the word microaggression because they're not micro. They are really, they're painful. It's very impactful to us psychologically. At times, I've even had to get my own individual therapist because of what I had to experience as I matriculated through academia in my social work courses. I had one professor who was an Italian woman, you know, make very off the wall statements about Black women. And I'm not going to say rebellious, but I'm very outspoken. I'm going to be that one. I'm going to say something, and the pressure is going to come. But the thing about it is I'm not going to allow people to intimidate me personally and nor professionally. And so it's like we earn the right to be in those spaces, whether it's in academia, we earn the rights to be supervisors, we earn the rights to be clinicians, we took the test, you know what I mean? We put the same level of work into what we do as other white clinicians do. And so many times I get frustrated with my Black peers because they are afraid to speak up. It's like, well, if we keep being silent, then we'll never change the problem. we actually help uphold racist systems. You know, I've had students so I'm gonna go back to the incident. So we were in the classroom, and this one Caucasian woman, well, I graduated with a 4.0. I also did a lot of work with the different organizations on campus. So it just was like a lot of, when you show up as a Black woman, a strong Black woman, an intelligent Black woman, not arrogant, just sure of who you are, that is very intimidating to white women of color in our profession. That's something that does not get talked about. And so when you show up as being intimidating, you're automatically attacked. They don't know you. I don't even know you. I don't know your kids. I don't know where you live. You know, I'm just being who I am. Well, in this situation, this white student had told this lie and said that I had, you know, chased her out of the school from the second floor. We had to have meetings. We sat with the dean of the school. They have video cameras. The incident never happened, never took place. It never happened. This student was not expelled. This is a social worker. She's, you know, now she's going on to be a licensed social worker, which is even more fearful because now you have this person with this racist ideology who actually has power over vulnerable people. So my issue is two. Because not only do we peer-to-peer deal with systemic racism from our peers, and we're on the same level. So I'm on the same level as a clinician. I'm on the same level as a master level social worker. And yet I still have to be subjected to racist ideologies. And my thing is, imagine how clients feel when you have clinicians or white social workers in positions of power who have these racist ideologies and are able to abuse their power, because I've seen it so many times in situations where it impacts the clientele that we serve. We know that this is true because the research bears it out. Like, at what point do we stop talking about the problem and we begin to address the real problem? In order to actually change this problem, we have to change what our social work profession looks like. When you look at these social service organizations, it's always white people on top. That's the problem right there. Because how can you say we're diverse, but yet the positions of power are not diverse? The power is not diverse. The resources is not diverse. Nothing is diverse. The only part that's diverse is when it comes to us as social workers actually interacting with the populations that we serve. If we do, so it's like even this space here, and I appreciate my white colleagues who are on here that are social workers. I respect your work for wanting to change the profession, but that part is also a problem. What it is we need for more Black clinicians, more to be in prominent positions in the NASW. We need them to be leaders. We need more Black women to be in those positions in the NASW, more Black men to be in those leadership positions in the NASW. It can't always be white people on top, because as long as the white people stay on top and the white people stay in charge of the resources, we're going to be having this conversation until Jesus returns. And that's the part that becomes frustrating. We're tired of it. This is why many Black social workers go into private practice, because then we can train our own, we can encourage our own, we can provide our own supervision to our own. And it's sad that we would have to even pull out of it altogether, because what else can we do? We're tired of having the conversation. We're tired of carrying the weight. I said it before, it's like dealing with someone that has NPD disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, because when a person doesn't have insight or they have this grandiose belief system, it's always up to the victim no, we're not walking around on eggshells anymore. Like, I know I'm not doing it. And it's just sad that if this doesn't change, you're going to see so many people of color come out of, when I say social work, I mean those social systems. They're going to start pulling out because we're burning ourselves out. It's like the hamster wheel to hell, and we're tired. We are tired, and I'm not going to apologize if people get offended. We are so completely tired and tapped out. And that's all I have to say. And thank you again.
Yes, I totally agree. The profession has to be prepared. I mean, we're going to be facing a tsunami of mental health issues as a result of the pandemic and racism. And, you know, the profession has to be prepared and committed to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking, and thank you just for speaking to tired, exhausted. Yes, we are tired, we are exhausted. Yes, we are trying to move on from having these conversations to be able to actually make change. This is part of it, right? Having these conversations and then moving on to making change, because conversations are not going to change it. Conversations are important, but it's not going to change it. And something that you said when you were speaking really highlighted to me. Somebody said this before about having healing spaces, because this is trauma. This is trauma. We learn about social work 101 about trauma, right? Racism is trauma. And so this is trauma. And as we're speaking to this, sometimes this can trigger things, and it could be traumatizing. And in our spaces of work, we're traumatized. So being able to have healing centered spaces that actually do, that we're able to get support and able to support each other. That is part of the work. That's part of it. I thank you for speaking to that. And just thank you for highlighting exhaustion, tired. Yes, all of that. Okay. Want to continue? Oh my gosh, it's wow, this conversation is so rich. I had a feeling it would be, but ooh, yeah, you guys are bringing it tonight. Eddie.
Hey everybody, Eddie here. So a couple of things, and I think it's gonna tie in a lot of it together. I think as we all sit in this space right now, some of us being clinicians, some of us being students, some of us being students who have worked in clinical settings like myself, it's important to identify that many clinical social workers stormed the Capitol and committed domestic terrorism. That's one. So even the people walking and sitting next to us in these spaces very well may not value our own lives or the lives of the clients in which they're supposed to serve. So it's important that we as social workers are cognizant that oftentimes when we graduate from our programs, we become agents who perpetuate state violence against the Black and brown body. We heard from somebody who worked for ACS, right? And understanding that their motto in ACS is when in doubt, pull them out. And who's being pulled out? More Black and brown kids, right? So as we go into clinical practice, clinicians have to really work way harder when working with IBB POC folk. And I say Indigenous, Black, brown, and people of color because I want to include that spectrum, because it is the Black and brown body that suffers the most, regardless of what language we speak, whether we're Indigenous or not. You know, wherever we come from, Black and brown folk can't walk nowhere in the world without being treated like trash. So how do we do that, right? How do we incorporate these kinds of modalities into our clinical practice? For me, things that I've identified is understanding spiritually integrative psychotherapy models. How do we incorporate someone's Indigenous spiritual faith into their intervention, into their assessment? I have a client whose child was removed by ACS simply because she practices Santeria. She hasn't seen her kid for 4 years. And the white social workers who have been on her case continue to say that she has psychosis when really she doesn't, right? So that's one. Two, how do we incorporate race-induced stress and race-incident trauma into our assessments? So understanding generational trauma, right? We talked about CBT and racial gaslighting. In that moment, when someone is talking about, I'm afraid of the police or I'm afraid of white people, this is a time to switch to a race-induced stress model and understand that that needs to be validated and we need to use a trauma-centered approach. And, you know, I'm very happy that the American Psychology Association has finally said something about racism within the foundation of practice. And the World Health Organization has said that racism is a health crisis globally. So now we have to address that within our own profession. How are we perpetuating this health crisis, right? The next thing is understanding adaptive slave syndrome. So many of us carry the weight on our shoulders of our ancestors, and how have we adapted just to function within these spaces? So when a lot of us as social workers see, for example, Black and brown parents who may not be as supportive, right? That could be a adaptive response, because we know that during slave era, we didn't want the slave master to breed our women, to sell off our men. right? So we have found ways to navigate that, and that has been passed down. And then the next thing is understanding that racism is a binary and not a spectrum. So many social workers who are white think that just because they do one thing, they're automatically absolved from that racism. But when they're confronted with their behavior, they fall and revert into white backlash and introjecting this inferiority complex that they cannot serve Black and brown people. But at the same time, ethically, if you don't have the competence to do so, then you need to be humble enough to step back and give those clients the help that they need, because you're not helping them. You're censoring yourself, you're censoring your privilege, and you're censoring your whiteness. And then lastly, because I always like to be that controversial one, understand your color currency and how much space you take up if you are a Black or brown person or a non-Black person of color who has the privilege within a pigmentocracy. So if you are lighter in complexion, right, you know that you're more digestible in Blackness, so they're gonna center you first. You know that they're gonna say, okay, let's put this person up here, because when we see darker Black folks speak, it's always more aggressive. So we have to also be cognizant of that. And then lastly, like, be cognizant of your conditional allyship if you have it. Because I know, like, in the chats in the beginning, I was seeing, comments like, well, are we going based off of skin color? Because I'm Latin. Okay, but you could be Black and Latin, you could be white and Latin. And the last time I opened up a history book, white Latin folk owned my people and committed genocide against my indigenous ancestors. So know your privilege, know how much space you take up. And if your allyship is, I'm cool with Black and brown folks riding the bus, but not driving it, you automatically got a lot of work to do, baby.
Don't make it messy.
Eddie, oh my gosh, you always bring down the house. Eddie, thank you. Speaking to truth. Ooh, speak it. Okay. Oh, there's a lot I could say, but I'm seeing the hands that keep on going up, and I'm also mindful of the time. Oh, I saw Venus.
Hi, I'm not on camera. I don't know if I raised my hand accidentally because I'm on my phone, because I'm still kind of working. I'm calling from California, and it's really nice to hear the power of the messages that you're sending out, because it's everywhere. I've been a social worker for 25 years and working on the state level in California. The things that you are talking about, it's even more manifested, and I think my whole life has been working towards the disproportionality of the children that are in our systems and in probation. And it's still something that we can't talk about because the powers be aren't comfortable with that. So I appreciate you allowing me to be in this space, because it's just bringing back a lot of that advocacy that I need to do more of. And so again, just thank you for allowing me this space.
Thank you, Venus. Tracy Ann.
Hello, it's Tracy Yvonne. It's okay. I actually wanted to, I'm in New York, and I wanted to just kind of bring it back to social work education, because I think someone mentioned in reference to gatekeeping, and we have failed our profession. There is no more gatekeeping. Anybody can just apply to social work school. Anybody can just do the program, and you have students who refuse to do self-reflection. You have students who refuse to address anti-racist work. You have students who will write a letter to the school and complain about an assignment. Okay, students who get removed from placement and put into another one. And then we graduate them. And then they somehow pass the test. And then they're in this program. So while we're talking about what's going on right now, and I get it, what is going on with social work education? Because that is where the gatekeeping is supposed to happen. And we are not gatekeeping. I teach. Okay. And I was a field liaison, and it's an absolute disgrace what is going on with our profession. It is open season for anyone, and students can say and do anything. They get upset, they don't want to self-reflect. And where is the accountability for the program? What happened to gatekeeping? Not saying that we can solve everything, but you're stopping it from there before they become licensed professionals, and that has stopped. So can there be a conversation with the Council on Social Work Education or something? Because it is a disgrace what is happening. Some of the things that are even said in the classroom, it's disgusting. And it's not about personal judgments, but this is the helping profession. What happened to do no harm? We're having this conversation because it's gotten worse because we're graduating students who are like this. So that has to be a conversation. It can't just be one class when you're talking about anti-racist work. This has to be embedded into the program if you follow the NASW Code of Ethics. But we're graduating these students who have these ideologies. That is a huge problem. So that needs to be a policy question, and I'm sure NASW can be involved with having that conversation with CW, Council on Social Work Education. But part of this is working on what's going on in the social work programs and addressing the lack of gatekeeping that is not happening. I try to be involved in those conversations on the state level, but it's an important conversation because it's an absolute and someone who's very involved with teaching. It's just very disheartening to see what we are turning out that's coming into our profession. So I just wanted to just say that, and thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Absolutely. Tracy Yvonne, thank you so much. And this is something that came up in previous town halls that we've had where we spoke about students, we spoke about social racism within social work education. Just wanted to highlight that this is going to be part of one of the working groups coming up. We talked about this in the beginning, is really talking about this. How are schools screening students? And what is that process like? So that's going to be discussed. That's going to be something that we are actively looking at. Just wanted to highlight that. But thank you so much for speaking to that because it is so real. And then they go out and they're actually in practices, right? Then they go out and they're actually in practices and they're causing harm, not just for their colleagues, but also for their clients. So we see how it all kind of fits together. But we're going to be addressing all of these in our upcoming working groups. Okay, continuing on. We're going to go with, I saw Taj.
Hi, Cicely. So, one second. So I am monitoring the Facebook Live, and there was just a couple questions or comments in there I felt like I just need to share with the group. Give me a moment. So I probably have to backtrack. Estefani, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, says, I think it is important that an opportunity for entrepreneurship is important for Black BIPOC social workers. They don't want our leadership, fine, we will create our own and the clients can choose where they get their treatment from. Then also she said, she had a question, are we reporting social workers who refuse to work on racism due to ethical concerns? And also, there was another comment. One moment. AC Johnson stated, a lot of organizations emphasize cultural competence, but in reality, that's not even the highest level of cultural capacity. The highest level is cultural proficiency. And then Estefani commented, she have not heard anyone mention about the trauma that the war on drugs imposed on BIPOC communities, the criminalization of drug use and sentencing toward the BIPOC community. And then she also mentioned about the indigenous community basically going unheard and silenced for years. So I will report back if anything else comes up.
Taj, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, next, Maxine.
Yes, hello everybody. I come from both sides. I was a kid that was in foster care. So the very first time I ever got to deal with a social worker was in the foster system. And I asked to be placed in a 2-parent home where I was placed in a 1-parent home, which I already had. And when I got there, the house was very beautiful, but we were lectured on what we could and couldn't do. It was a very strange environment, but it was very abusive. And I was just lost in the fact that the social worker that claimed to care so much about me and take me out of my abusive home, and I'm going to put you in somewhere better that's going to treat you better, and all of these Disneyland explanations she was giving me, when I got there, it was worse than home. So I went home. Within 24 hours, it was some type of storm that happened. I live in San Diego, California, by the way. We don't really have major storms, but for some reason in that year, it did. It rained a lot. It was very cold. I was taken from school versus home. So I was in short pants and a tank top. So this lady's house, she didn't give the heat to us foster children, where we were all in one room that didn't have heat, in which you could funnel the heat to the other part of the house or give us heat, which she chose not to give us heat. And as long as I've been abused in my household, I had certain things. So you as a person develop certain standards. And when you're taken from your home, that's horrible, or explained to you as horrible, and you're going to be put somewhere else and it's worse, but it looks better, that doesn't make you feel good as a child. So one of the girls there that was in foster care had diabetes, and it was her birthday. So a couple of her friends bought her a cake at school. So when she got home with us, she couldn't have cake because she had cake earlier. Well, the foster mother made her eat the cake, even though she told her, I already ate cake earlier. This child went into a diabetic coma in the bed right next to me. My brain could not even understand that at 14 years old. All I knew is when I left and I went home is I want this job. Whatever this social work thing is, I know I can do it better as a 14-year-old. I knew I could have did a better job than this lady. I ran home because I've always been taught to keep money in my pocket. So I had $1. At then the bus was 80 cents and it was 20 cents to call on a payphone. So I ran until where I knew where I was at because I didn't know where I was at. I ran all the way until I knew where I was at. I recognized buses and where they went. I got on the bus and I went home. That lady came and got me on Monday and told me that she's going to close my case. And obviously I want to get pregnant and be nothing in the world because I left where she took me. And I told her, no, I'm not going to be nothing in the world. I just wanted you to put me in a place that I felt safer than I did at home. You could have left me in Polinsky or left me in a car than to take me somewhere that was worse than my own house. So since that day, I've been wanting to be a social worker. Life got in the way. I've gone through a lot. I am now on that educational journey. And I love that Miss, I can't pronounce her name, but she just spoke before me. And she was talking about the educational piece. No one warned me that people were going to block me from my education. No one told me that someone was going to stop me from trying to be a social worker. This is what I've always wanted to do. I do it anyway. I'm the resource person to anybody that knows me. Where is this? Somebody needs something paid. They need food. Do you know anybody with some extra shoes, socks, whatever? This is what I do. I'm like, I might as well get the degree and go get this thing. I've been on the journey and I've had so many roadblocks. My science teacher thought I wanted to be a nurse, and I told him I wanted to be a social worker. He told me I was a C student. I am a double honor road student. Do you know before the semester was over, this man had a C on my transcript? And I have fought. No one helps me. And that's what I don't like about us. We have to help each other. We have to support each other. The silence is, you're agreeing. When you don't say anything or you say no, that's still an answer. So I just want to speak to everyone that has your license and your degrees, these things that I live by. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's Martin Luther King. It's another saying from Malcolm X. I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. I'm for justice, no matter who it is for or against. At some point, we need to put actions together and stop talking. I love when Miss Mimi had brought up some situations where that we do need more Black people in positions of power. It's never going to change when the scale is never tipped in our favor. And we have to quit being so complacent. I'm not saying that we can't express ourselves in a healthy way, because we all know we can. But I'm just saying we have to stop being silent and allowing our fellow social workers to get, I heard 6 people get fired. Do you know how scary that is? It's not going to deter me, but do you know how scary that sounds as a student? I'm on the AA level. I'm trying to transfer to state next fall. And I'm having all of these problems, and I'm looking at you guys with DSWs and MSWs and BSWs, and you guys are saying all of this stuff that I had no clue was in this profession, but I do know it as a client. That's why I want to make a difference and I want to make the change. And thank you, Miss Liz, for sharing. That tore me up. But I love that you said it didn't matter. It wasn't going to stop you, because you do know that there's something else better for you out there than whatever was going on in that moment. So keep that strength. And yes, it is hard for all of us. Just know that we're looking to you guys. We need mentors. I am a student. I am a non-traditional student. I have disabilities. I fall in 7 marginalized communities, and my school does not let me forget it every second of the day. Out of 38 classes, 31 of them are A's, and I get treated like I am an F student. If I speak up, I'm angry, I'm mad. When I'm passionate about my education, my culture, there were people who couldn't read. It was against the law. People have died for me to get an education. I'm just serious and passionate. So we need each other. And I agree, we need more of our white brothers and sisters to do the work, not us. We got your back, but we need more white people in the forefront making these changes, because they're never going to get changed. They're their cousins and brothers and uncles and sisters. So all I'm saying is keep the light burning. They need us. This world needs us all of us. Social workers are different kinds of people. That's why I love Miss Tracy said what's going on with the education, and everybody shouldn't be allowed in this field. If you're not going to be culturally proficient, culturally competent, culturally open, have a non-fixed but a growth mindset, you should not even be anywhere near this field, period. Because that's what this field is about, bringing people together, not tearing people apart or allowing people to be torn apart. So I just wanted to share that I was on both ends and I'm working to get to where you guys are. So I'm from San Diego, California. Thank you.
Maxine, thank you for sharing both your history in the foster care system and just speaking to all of that. Thank you, so powerful. And your words just gave me chills, like seriously. And thank you. Reminds me of Amanda's poem. In the beginning, Samantha read out the last part of Amanda's poem about the light. We are the light. So let us keep shining our light. We are the light, but we don't shine it individually. We are a community. Together, we are collective. Change happens on a collective level. So yes, let's keep it going. Thank you. Okay. All right. A couple of more people. Tangela. Okay, Tangela. Okay. Next, I have someone asked me in the chat, Brondolyn, before if they wanted to speak.
Hey, how are you all? I'm sorry, I'm here. My Zoom is acting crazy.
No
Good
worries.
evening. How are you all doing? I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation. I am from Hampton, Virginia, so I am a member of the Virginia chapter of the NASW. So I just wanted to just briefly speak about racism in the context of racism within our own race, right? Because that is a real thing. So we are not only inhibited by our white counterparts, but also our black counterparts. And I don't think that that is necessarily has been addressed. So I went to an HBCU. I was discriminated in my internship by a Black woman who attempted to get me thrown out of school or have to kind of start back from the beginning. And I used the advocacy skills that I had to be able to advocate for myself through the CSWE, through the NASW, to be able to keep myself in school. FYI, I just got my license yesterday, so I just passed the licensing exam yesterday. So I recognize that there are spaces and places that do have racism. And I think that it's important for each of us to remember that racism does not come necessarily from outside systems. They sometimes, and a lot of times, come from our own systems. They actually are inherited from those systems. So when we speak about racism, it's also very important to remember what we're doing to each other and how we are lifting each other up in the context of our profession. That is a real thing. And I'm going to say too, we really need to be aware of this as Black women, as Black men, how we create the space for ourselves, right? So I started off in the NASW chapter in Virginia as a student member, and I was the student representative for my college. And it was through that I got more heavily involved in the NASW. So I sit as the PACE committee chair for the state of Virginia. I also serve right now as the second vice president for my chapter. So it really is about creating the space for your voice to be heard. And I have learned that, if nothing else, that racism is not necessarily from the outside, it's from the systems that we create inside. So it's important to not rely on the people who do not look like us to give us a seat at the table. It is more so important for us to pull up our chair and sit at the table. I make no apologies for who I am. I am flamboyant. I am extra. I come with a lot of sparkle. I come with a lot of knowledge, and I come with a lot of sass, and I make no apologies for it. So I don't ask and I don't expect for anyone to give me any damn thing. I go to work every day and I show up and I show out. Okay. My boss is a white man and I show out the whole time. That is what is expected. I wear my social work skills, talents, abilities, and knowledge on my chest like a badge of honor, because that is exactly what it is. So let's not say that the system is not made for us. The system is not made for us because we think it's not made for us. The system is exactly designed for us. It is exactly designed for us to do what we are taught in our core competencies and in our professional ethics all day long. I don't apologize one bit. I said what I said, and that's it. I do recognize, however, in the system, I work for a state agency who determines competency for individuals who are bought in. So I work on an interdisciplinary team, and we service a lot of people who are of color. And I recognize that sometimes those people do not get advocated for, or in a way that white patients get advocated for. I stand up for them. No, ma'am, you are not gonna, that's not what we're gonna do. What we're gonna do is treat everybody fairly. And if I feel like you're not treating them fairly, I'm definitely gonna check you, period. Like, that's it. So I don't expect for this system to be designed for me. I expect for this system to adapt to the person that I am, to my profession, my knowledge, my skills, and my abilities. We have to keep in mind that social work is an art and a science, and you can take that however which way you want to take it. Like, we are designed to do this work. Nobody said that they were going to give us anything. They didn't say that. But what they said was you have the opportunity to stand in the space and make yourself heard. And that is exactly what I do. And I went to a HBCU and I had people to tell me, oh, we're not going to talk about this with you right now. I'm sorry, what? Because last time I checked, my loans paid for this education. So not only will you talk to me about it, that's not even an option. Like, we will talk about this. And if you don't want to talk about it, trust and believe me, there are other resources, there are other higher levels that will have this conversation for me. So I think that it is important that we take a stand and say, nah, not today, not today. So that's all that I'm saying. So it's important not to just think about racism on the outside. It's important to think about racism on the inside. As Black women, how are we lifting one another up? As Black clinicians, how are we handing back to the people that are behind us to inspire them? Like, that's really, really important. And are you in a position to advocate for yourself? Because if you're not in a position to advocate for yourself, then there's no way that you are effectively communicating advocacy for outside entities at all. I don't come from money. I don't pretend to come from money at all. Like, I came from the projects in New York City. I grew up in Edenwald projects. You know what I mean? I went to public school. I rode the train, all of those things. However, the way that I provide services to my populations is the way that I want. If I had a child who was in the system, those are the ways that I advocate. In the legal system, those are the ways that I advocate. In the streets, that is the way that I advocate. Just like you said, Maxine, like, I was always the one to provide resources. Like, I'm that person to be like, oh, how do I get this? How do I get that? I make sure that people's needs are met because I'm a social worker. I'm a social worker. You know what I mean? So all I'm saying is, let's not just continue to look at the way that racism affects us on the outside. Let's look at the way racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, let's look at the way those things affect us from the inside. And that's not through anyone's fault but our own. We are only going to get what we ask for. I'm trying to get what I'm finna take. And that's all that I have to say. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, gentlemen. Y'all have a wonderful evening. This was a great space, and I look forward to, you know, being here and just being in this space and just being able to, you know, just take in all of this information. But, you know, at the end of this all, we are social workers. This is what we do. And we just have to be in a space to, you know, manage ourselves and create the expectation, not let the expectation manage us. So thank you all.
Ooh, thank you. Thank you. Wow. I think we all needed to hear that. I know I needed to hear that. So thank you. And I really love that. Let us be unapologetically us. Let us be unapologetically who we are. There's something that came up in the chat way back, like 2 hours ago, maybe, when this conversation first started. So I said, our organization needs to uplift the whole identities of all of us. And that is really what I think we're speaking to, right? Is we need to be unapologetically us. We're not apologizing. We're not holding back. We are unapologetically us. And we understand, though, that there are ramifications for that. And that is part of our racist system, right? Because that's designed so that we do not show our full selves, so that we do not come across as who we are, that we, you know, kind of temper ourselves and restrain ourselves. But we can't do that. We got to be unapologetically us. But I acknowledge, yes, unapologetically gets us fired. So, yeah. All right. I'm seeing a couple of others. Just really quickly, because I know I'm looking at the time, and you know, we're supposed to end at 7:30, but that doesn't usually happen. So this is a sign that we are engaged in a really, really good conversation. You guys are bringing it this evening. David.
I'm here. So I just wanted to speak towards that as well. I would love to be able to say your name, but I can't. Can't pronounce it, and I don't want to mess it up. So I wanted to speak to that because I was working recently at a trauma center and as a social worker there, and it was a new environment for me. And I was speaking to my coworkers about some of the issues that I saw there in this facility in particular, and who to speak to about it. And that particular a colleague came to me and said, "Ooh, you're one of those. You're one of those that thinks that just because your lighter skin color gives you that flexibility to go ahead and have this conversation and walk into the boss's office and talk to them about the issues that you're having." And to me, I'm thinking to myself, well, if I'm one of those and I have that lighter skin tone that you're speaking of, why not flex that for the betterment of us? Why do I have to stand down, quiet myself so that it doesn't bother anyone? It doesn't, just to keep it copacetic in the workplace. And I didn't see that as appropriate. And so when Eddie, you were speaking towards that about knowing our space and knowing about what room we take up when it comes to the pigmentation of our skin, it also at the same time is coming together and working together, realizing that, hey, we have this pigmentation that might put us at the front because our hair might be a little different, our skin tone might be a little different. But at the end of the day, racism to me is still racism. And I've experienced it, maybe not to the level that others have experienced it, but I still experienced it. And if I can flex that little bit, tiny bit of privilege that I'm afforded because my father is white and my mom is not, let me flex that so that I can do it for the betterment of others. And I was really confused and really confused and thrown off when I was pretty much told, no, sit down and stay at this level because we don't want you to bother anyone. And I understand that if I'm to speak, it could go off to the entire team. But again, if no one's speaking and no one's bringing up any issues to management, then how are we to expect change? Conversations at midnight when management is off the clock and in their homes and we're on the floor don't mean anything. That doesn't do anything. It just tires us out. It makes us bitter about our work environment. So I just wanted to share on that. And then Maxine, to your point, I'm a former foster care youth. I have my, I did my AA, did my BSW, and I have my MSW. So you got this. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Oh, and I think you were asking how to pronounce my name. I don't know if you were asking me that, but Cecily. In case, I don't know if you were asking me that or somebody else, but thank you for speaking. Just a couple more.
Cecily, I just want to say that Yvette's back on. So before you go on to the next person, I know Yvette was trying to ask a question earlier on.
Awesome.
You need to turn your microphone on, Yvette.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I'm from Philadelphia. I am a trainer and I also have been working in child welfare for 25 years. I have been doing DEI work for the last 15 years. And I hear in this room, which I really am glad that I came because this is a good place where I don't have to be the teacher in the room. But I wanted to just remind everybody, because all of us are impacted by trauma. And it's a big thing around trauma-informed care and secondary trauma. But at the end of the day, we have to be responsible for self-care as much as we can. Because if we don't, and you don't have the kind of resources that you can go to or supervisor that you can see, during the in-between times when we can't meet as a group, there is just, part of most of my trainings have a piece about self-care. And I think that one of the ways that I would like to support or bring along is little activities that people can do on their own to just center themselves, maybe 15 minutes or 30 minutes, you know, because this is drawing a lot of emotions for me. And I have been doing this work for a long time. And I thought being in this field as long as I have and being well known, which would help me. So one of the things that we've done is we now travel as a team, and we train with one Caucasian person and one African American person, or another person of color, depending who's available out of our committee. Because we found that that's where we get the most engagement. But while this was going on, the agency that I worked for, and I had some conversations, and they didn't care for what I was saying. And I was let go after 17 years for speaking the way I've always spoke. However, we had new management. And in Philadelphia, it's very diverse, but outside of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, we have a very, very rural setting, and there's a lot of hate groups and a lot of things, a lot of privilege that people don't like to be questioned about. And, you know, when we got our new people, I had to leave because I could not go back to that person I was before I started these trainings. And so, yes, it hurt my heart that I had to go, but I had to take care of myself, because if I tried to stay or do anything different than continuing to care for myself at 63, I would be in a different place. But one of the things that I talked to Temple University, that's where I graduated from, I talked to the social work program about this needs to start in school. Self-care needs to start in school, because it's okay to be hurt. It's okay to take 30 minutes. You know, my kids used to say, because I went to grad school while they were in school, and I would come in and I would say, listen, I need 30 minutes, just 30 minutes, so that I can take a deep breath, go in my room, take my hair down, lay down, sit up, whatever it is, depending on what today is like. But there's just so many little ways that I've found that we can do in the car, we can do to decompress after a tense meeting, those kind of things. So I am hoping that if I'm invited to your next meeting, that I can share some of those activities with you. And I thank you all, because I listened to all of you, and I really appreciate being able to hear other experiences.
Thank you.
Well, that's it.
Yvette, thank you so much. And thank you for bringing up the piece about self-care that came up before. And I think that's a theme. I mean, there's been so many themes running throughout this conversation, my goodness. But one of the themes is about self-care and healing, because this is trauma, and just sharing our experiences sometimes can be re-traumatizing, re-triggering. So how are we taking care of ourselves? So we would love at the next town hall, if you can bring in, I think Samantha said that in the chat, because we need it. And I would also say that, you know, self-care happens in community. We're part of a caring community. And so it's not on our own, you know, we have our own practices to do, but we support each other in that process. So thank you for bringing that up, because we really do need to be thinking about healing. How do we heal ourselves? How do we heal our communities? That's where it's at right now. Okay, a couple of others. I had Nathan, Benita, and Andrea.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so very much for the opportunity. I still haven't figured out how to do the raise your hand, but we'll get to that another time. I'm a member of an organization called Black Men in Social Work. And so we are about 1,400 members strong. But one of the things that I wanted to bring into the space is it's more of a policy issue and a practice issue that I would like us all to think about and to consider. Is if you look throughout it's 278 of us remaining, but it was over 600 earlier. And how many men of color did you notice were in the room, right? And part of that is the sister talked about gatekeeping earlier, right? And so when we think about this notion of gatekeeping, you know, I taught Black and brown men in a correctional center last year. And many of them became inspired and said, you know, I want to do this work in my effort to give back. And so then we began the conversation around, you know, schools of social work not admitting those men after they've paid their debt to society, et cetera, instead of entering into this perpetual punishment, right? And so, you know, then we look at, again, who are social work organizations serving? People of color, young men of color who never really see anyone that looks like them. I remember my first social work job, walking in, I thought I was tall, tan, and talented, had my little briefcase and khakis on. And a mother pointed at me and said, I want my son to work with him. I mean, she didn't know anything about me except that I was Black and that I was male, right? And so I think my hope is NASW, CSWE, someone can start working with these organizations that say, let's look at people with criminal backgrounds on a case-by-case basis, right? I understand the need to protect children. Trust me, I'm not trying to say, make it a free-for-all. Please don't misunderstand that. But I think we also need to be innovative and advocate and really do this social justice work in a way that we can kind of, you know, empower our communities, because a lot of men are doing this work anyway. In fact, some of us are doing this work as barbers, right? Cutting hair, but we're serving kind of a mental health capacity, right? Some of us are doing the work as bartenders. Some of us are doing it as pastors or as teachers. We're doing this work, but some of us don't realize that we can do this work as social workers, you know, one, because we need to do a better job of defining what social work is, by the way, too, right? Because I remember growing up, social workers, the people who gave you food stamps or took your kids. So, but that's another conversation we'll talk about, right? And so again, as these men pay their debt to society and kids don't have the opportunity to see men who look like them, right? How are we changing that narrative? How are we pushing back against these schools of social work? How are we pushing back against these accrediting agencies and even state agencies that says you have a criminal background, so you can't get a license, right? Yet, when you look disproportionately, who is causing a lot of the harm? It isn't always the people who have those backgrounds, right? Because a lot of times, people who have backgrounds, guess what? We understand if something comes up missing, who are you gonna look at first? Okay, and so my hope is that we can put this on the table at the national level, at NASW, you know, at CSWE, at SWR, all of these organizations. I know NABSW is gonna put that on their radar. I know I can count on them for that. But we really need to try to push, because I believe, again, we're an organization with 1,300 men. We want to try to double our numbers, triple our numbers even, by going out and recruiting young men of color and men even in, guess what? A lot of men of color locked up. So that's an underserved population that if we can help rehabilitate them, to say, how can we get you to go back into your communities and help people never come into this prison industrial complex? Isn't that social work? Isn't that advocacy? Isn't that the change we need? So let's make it happen, social workers. Thank you so very much for the time.
Yes, yes, it's exactly the change we need. It's about creating those alliances in the community, you know, because when we think about the school to prison pipeline, right, and we talk about, you know, social work, you know, being focused on control rather than care, and then who gets the care and who gets the control, you know, it is a discussion that we need to have in the profession, because it impacts lives. Thank you.
Nathan, thank you, thank you, thank you. Benita, and then
Hello.
Andrea.
Hello, everyone. I'm Benita. I'm a licensed clinical social worker associate in North Carolina, and I work in medical social work. But the main thing I just wanted to add to the conversation is the the recommendation or the plea for us who get into leadership and management positions not to forget and not to step on the necks of our fellow Black or social workers of color once we feel like we arrive. And that's one of the things that I feel like I have been the most hurt by is administrators in places who are people of color who make it to certain roles and forget all about the work in reference to equality, and they get lost in the money and get lost in the fame of it, I think sometimes for being the one that makes it to the top, and forget to advocate for those who are still trying to continue the work. And I have, like I said, I think I've been the most hurt by that when I am told or directed to comply, or I see my sisters and brothers that are in high places that are of color and pretty much reprimand you for expecting them to have a better perspective. And yeah, because I think I have a expectation for those who are not people of color to have a certain perspective, but when you are a person of color and you make it to those roles, it gives me hope, and then to be disappointed is like the most painful sometimes. So I just ask for those of us who want to get to that point or who are already there to not forget and to use the platform for the good and not just be focused on the money. Thank you.
Thank you, Benita. And now we're going to go to Andrea, and then someone just messaged me in the chat. Brondolyn also wants to speak. So Andrea and then Brondolyn.
Hi, everybody. This has been a powerful conversation. And so many things I've heard that have caught a piece of my head at this point. I think one of the things I keep hearing, and I always have a problem with this, and they you know, how we have to do stuff to fix the system and fix this and fix that. And I think because we labor under the fantasy that this system is broken, it's not. This system is broken, is working exactly as it was designed to. It is not broken. It doesn't need fixing. We need a whole different system. And I think to respond to Sister, what was her name, Benita's point about, you know, people of color that get in higher positions, you know, I always keep in mind that, again, the system works exactly as it's done, as it's supposed to. It trains, it brainwashes, it educates us. And for some of the people to get to those positions, they had to drink a lot of Kool-Aid to get up there. So now, and it goes back to what another sister said about there not being gatekeepers. There's always gatekeepers. They're not necessarily looking for what you think they should be looking for. And sometimes the gatekeepers are us. And I think we need to recognize that piece too. And I more and more, I'm firmly convinced that we will not get to any place real within the system that currently exists. We will not, because it's not for us. It's working the way it's supposed to. And social workers by nature are trained to treat symptoms. We treat the symptoms. We don't treat the problem. We treat alcoholism. We treat drug abuse. We treat child abuse. We treat poverty. Those are the symptoms of the problem. Racism is the problem. And until we have something in place that will deal with that problem, we'll be forever putting Band-Aids on jugular veins. We just will always be doing that. So that I think we have to, what's the word I'm looking for? Reimagine what the issue is and reimagine what we need to do to address it. And also reimagine what we're willing to do and risk to make it happen. Because you can't be fooled that to do the work that needs to be done is not without risk. And sometimes your people and people of color in higher places do what they do because they become afraid to lose that because they work so hard to get it. It's not that they don't care about other people of color, it's not that, but they work so hard to get it. They're not stupid. They know that if they do certain things, they will lose that position, and so they don't want to do that. So we have to be realistic about what it might cost and how much we're willing to lose for it. And you can't, my great uncle, he was a poker player. And one of his favorite sayings was, if you can't afford to lose, you can't afford to bet. And we need to think about that. How important is this to us? And what are we willing to risk or lose to get what we need to have? Because otherwise, again, we'll just keep putting Band-Aids on jugular veins and things will not ever really change in the big picture for us. One or two make it out, one or two make it up, one or two get sober, one or two get whatever, but the big picture will not ever change for us. And that's the thing. And it doesn't really matter who's at the top until the whole picture changes. So those are my thoughts. Great conversation tonight. Thank you, guys. Go back
Always
and
love
listen to
hearing from
Scott
you.
Heron.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea, for your thoughts. We say we love this profession. We love social work. Well, love is an action word. So this is a call.
Yes.
A call for action.
Yes, Andrea, I like how you say reimagine. This is about reimagining. And also thank you for highlighting that the system is designed to do exactly what all systems are designed to get the outcomes that it's going to get, right?
Exactly.
Not a broken system. It's designed exactly how it needs to be designed. We are here to say, nope, you know what? We're not taking this system anymore. And we're not tweaking, we're not having tweaks in systems, little adjustments here and there. No, we need to totally reimagine, but also the costs and benefits of that, right? So thank you for speaking to that. Oh, so much.
People have a fantasy of America. I mean, after all that craziness on the 6th, you heard all those people saying, oh my God, I'm so upset. This is not who we are. Yes, it sure as hell is. This is exactly who we are.
Yes.
We've been this for 400 years. Now they have the courage to show it out front, but this is exactly who we are. But we have fantasy. This is not what America is about. Of course it is. Of course it is. And it's like, again, it's like addiction. It's like whatever else. Until you acknowledge that you're an addict, you never get clean. Until we acknowledge that this is what we are, we will never get any better at all.
Have to acknowledge, have to speak truth, have to acknowledge. We don't want to hear it. Some people don't want to hear it, but we got to say it. Okay, we're going to finish out with 4 folks. Man, we were supposed to end what, like 2 hours ago? Brondalyn, who reached out to me like several times, Brondalyn in the chat. Yes, if you're there, please, we would love to hear from you.
I am here. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys so much for creating this space and just using your experience and your platforms to really invite the world. I'm from the great state, an interesting state, Oklahoma. I follow you guys on Facebook, and I literally shared this with all of my Oklahoma contacts and social work friends. And I know Oklahoma is a different state. I mean, we have our own barriers, but just being able to have a space for professionals to get this insight and just really just grow here. So thank you so much for using this space. I will jump right in. So number one, let me give a shout out to all the foster kids on here, because I'm confident that I'm not the only one. And I know we had 2 others speak earlier. The social service, being in the social service field is a calling for anyone. But if you've had lived experience, it's a different type of calling, because it's your life that you get to not so much relive, but really just use your personal experience and be able to bring that to the forefront to help and impact youth that you're working with. So whether it's the child welfare system, juvenile justice system, whatever it may be, shout out to us, because this ain't easy, because it's like you watching your life play over and over, and how you can do what you can as a professional to help and improve those things. But then you're also getting to see up close and personal how racism really played a lot of unique roles in your own personal life. So again, going back to that self-care moment, please make sure you're taking care of yourselves all around. I will share just quickly 2 experiences that were really unique to me. I remember the first time I worked in social services, I was a case aide, and I was assigned to supervise visits for biological parents. And so I was so excited because it was this opportunity, this particular family, the mother had, I think, like 6 kids, big family, all in custody, all placed throughout the state. So I would coordinate visits and I would get them all together, and we were all excited. And her case worker was a white woman, and I would staff the meetings with her and let her know how the visits went. I think it really went well. The mom, oftentimes, she would like stop at Dollar General or maybe Dollar Tree, if y'all know if y'all have that out here. But one of the cool things, she would like bring little small trinkets, just like tokens for the kids to take home and just like, remember me, mama's out here working hard, I'm trying to do everything I can. And it was clear to me of what her intentions were. And the white case manager looked at it as if she was trying to buy their love. And I was like, oh, that's different, because culturally, we don't really have that type of money to buy anybody love, especially if you're starting with nothing and you're really just trying to just let your kids know that you're trying to do something and you want them to have something of their own and something to, remember you by. And so that was the first time. I was probably 19, maybe 20. I was 20. And that was my first case manager job. And I had to literally speak up and talk to the supervisor. And I'm like, I think this is being reported incorrectly. I think this is she wasn't even at the visits, and this is what I've observed. And it was really more so of like, I said, I think there's a cultural difference. And I was so naive on how to present it. I was just really honest about it. And I think what I had to learn is like, how to be a little more strategic in presenting those conversations. But it was clear to me from the moment I walked into working in social services that there were some discrepancies and misunderstandings, and I say misunderstandings, pure racism. And I will say, this case manager, I'm confident she had no ill intentions, but that doesn't mean that you are not racist. And I think that's something people can often disengage on. So fast forward about 15 years later, I actively work in the social service field. I work mostly with veterans at this moment, and I oversee a team of social workers. In this current moment, I still do consulting work for training. Implicit biases, absolutely. But I currently do training for social work, still in the state of Oklahoma. And I cannot, you think that we have a little bit of growth sometimes, but then people just remind you quickly. During the training, we were talking about managing aggressive behaviors, working with youth and adolescents in group homes and what that looks like. And in that particular moment, there was a program that we were working with, and it was so mind-boggling because first off, the owner of the program was really excited, or the leader of the program, about basically that their program was so new and it was one of the largest programs ever, and it's large in that field of study and whatnot. And she referenced the component like over and over, and I was like, well, how many clients are you serving? And she's like, oh, well, we've only had 2. And I was like, okay. So that was already interesting in itself. But when we got to the actual clients that she were working with, she referenced the particular use she had in her home was an African-American teenager, probably about 17. And again, this is an all-white staff, all majority female staff. The young girl kept expressing and complaining about there was no diversity. She didn't have any staff members she could relate to. They didn't understand the importance of hair care, skin care. And I mean, these are a lot of basic things I would consider foundational in reference to working with youth in general. And the leader of their organization made the comment that she makes it seems like, she said verbatim, she said, the youth makes it seems like that we're so different. It's not like she's from from another country or something. And I'm like, my mind was blown. And I'm in the middle of this training, and you still gotta, keep your face on, still be professional. But it was like, you have no idea, like completely disengaged. And she kept trying to say that the youth was being manipulative because she kept referencing race and that there wasn't really a race issue. She just didn't want to comply. And so I had 2 white counterpart co-trainers, and I'm grateful for them. But what was clear from me is that literally we're in a Zoom and I'm messaging one of the other counterparts. I was like, so are y'all gonna get this or me? Because we can't just let this stay out here. And so the lead trainer, she definitely addressed it, and she did it, I would say, for me, she did it poetically. It wasn't as direct as I would have preferred, but I do feel like the purpose is to educate and inform, and that was her intentions, and I think she did well doing that. But what also hit me is that I left that training triggered by that. And my white counterparts went home and didn't think twice about it again. And I share this story on a consistent basis. I use this as an example oftentimes right now when we're talking about how clueless and how disconnected someone can be. And they're so proud to be in the social service field, but completely removed from what's really going on around them. And then also I talk about that self-care component of how my counterparts can address racism and they can call it out, and they can, you know, call, as my grandma likes to say, call a spade a spade. But when they go home, they're not worried about it. They don't have to think about it. And I literally went home like, oh Lord, am I gonna have to open my home up for this baby? Am I like, I'm thinking about like, who do I know could maybe take her in? Because right now she's being more traumatized or re-traumatized in her experience, and you're supposed to be helping her. And so I share that to say, just up close and personal, the work we're doing is meaningful, it's impactful. It takes a team, it takes a united front, it takes a space for Black social workers to be able to have this conversation, to have this dialogue, but it also calls for our white counterparts to stand up and to take it personal. Like, you have to stop saying, I'm not okay with racism and I'm not going to let this happen. Like, it has to hit home for you. It has to make sure that when you go home and you're putting your kid in bed at night, that this is something that you're feeling personally, because it could happen to your kid. And I think that until our white counterparts really take it personal, this will continue to happen. And I think that the best way that we as Black social workers can help the situation is continue being present. And again, showing up in our full capacity, our best selves, taking care of ourselves, knowing how to take time off, disconnecting, telling people, yes, I may be experienced in this, and yes, I have the knowledge, but number one, you're gonna pay me. Number two, and if you're not gonna pay me, then maybe I can connect you with somebody that's ready for that experience. Because I'm at a point now, it's like, we're professionals, respect our degrees, respect our insight, respect the experience. Just because you're just now seeing racism doesn't mean that we have to come out and put on our armor and our extra gear to help you understand and fix it. Like, I can call it out, I can give you the insight, I can do all of that if I want to, because I am a professional and I have the choice. So I say all of that to say, thank y'all so much again for creating this space. But on my soapbox, it is not our responsibility. I need my white counterparts to bring your A game, because this is not gonna go nowhere unless y'all get on board and you make it personal. Thank you.
Brandolyn, thank you. Thank you. Woo.
Allies, we need you. We need allies.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Speaking to so much. Okay, we are closing out very, very shortly. Latanya, I know Latanya wanted to go for a while. So Latanya.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm grateful to be here in this space. Can you hear me? Perfect. I'm a MSW MED student currently in MED in human sexuality. And so I'm grateful to be in that space, although that space too has its own issues with racism and inequities. One of the things, and Brandolyn, thank you, because you actually were speaking to exactly how I was feeling about responsibilities and agendas and processes. So one of the things I've always asked, being one of 3 Black students in the class, usually I'm the only one, so I was glad to have company this time, is, you know, there was a discussion that went on in the classroom, and it got really, really intense. And I said to my white counterparts, I said, when you leave here, because they're from all over the country, they fly in for class and then they leave. When you leave here, you take your coat off, you hang it on the hook, and you go home, just like Bronwyn said, and you don't have to think about it. I don't ever get a chance to take my coat off. People who look like me keep our coat on 24/7. And we wear this thing 24/7. It is with us when we go to sleep. It is with us when we wake up. It is with us when we're sick. It is with us when we're on vacation with our families trying to enjoy ourselves. It is with us 24 hours a day. You get to take it off and go back to wherever you came from. And like Brondalyn said, say, whew, I'm good, right? I then challenge people and say, and some folks is gonna get upset by this, but then I want you to sit with that. And I want you to think about why you're upset about what I'm getting ready to say. And then I see white folks adopting Black babies. What is it that you say to a Black child when they come home and they say to you that they've been discriminated against or they face racism? I got a very good girlfriend who's white. Her son is biracial. He faced that very thing. She had nothing to give him. Nothing. And as a mother, I am a mother. As a mother, I only could grieve for her because I know when my son comes home and says, this is my day that I had, I can say, and this is what you need to think about, and this is how you need to manipulate through the systems of racism here and here and here. But when you have these babies that you decide to adopt, you have to think about, or people are adopting, you have to ask these questions in the profession. What do you think? How do you then help them navigate? What do you bring to the have you educated yourself on their culture? Have you educated yourself on anything that may be that's dealing with this child? Most of the time they have not. And they try to assimilate that child to a discredit to the white culture, separate them from anything and anybody that looks like them. And it's all for being able to say we provided a home, but it's more to it than providing a home when you're raising a child that's of color. So now that we've had all of this great conversation, and we've been having conversations for a while, and I hear these conversations happening, and that's great because Black and brown bodies are being able to tell white America, here's your shit in your face. Now, what's on your agenda next to do something about it, right? What agenda do you have? Who's now typing up notes and making sure that y'all get together and figure out an agenda? Because I love process, as we all do. Like, we want to see progress, right? So we've talked about all this stuff. You're armed with all kinds of information. But like many of us have said, it is now time for you. You created this system, you got to fix it. We're showing you where you're exposed. We're showing you where there's issues. We're showing you where there's problems. But you got to fix it. And here's the other thing. When we create systems of our own, stop taking them over. Stop coming in and stealing stuff. Stop trying to make it your own. Stop trying to make us fit what you want it to be. When it's created by us, it's for us, leave it to us so that we can do what we need to do. There's a reason why we keep creating, right? Because you keep taking. But we need these systems because as you see, there's certain things that we need to do and certain ways we need to prepare our folks for moving forward. We talked about, well, it's been hinted on post-traumatic slave syndrome and why people who make it turn around and are not willing to help other people behind them. It's that reason. You know, we've been unfortunately taught by trauma to protect our own by keeping them back, right? By not showing how bright you are, by not showing what you know and what you do, because like Eddie said so gracefully, you know, that meant that somebody didn't come home, or that meant that somebody got sold off, or something of that nature. So that is perpetuated still. We need to learn that we're still doing that to each other and just stop it. Sankofa, we have to go back and get it. We got to go back and get those who are behind us and bring us forward, right? That's that Sankofa meaning. And we all have to be on that Sankofa page, because if not, then we're not going to be able to move forward. We say crabs in a barrel, we call it all kinds of syndrome. Yes, we do tear each other down. So let's stop that, right? And then when we stop that and we build what we need to build for us, by us, for us, and then white folks take up that responsibility of making sure that y'all police y'all own and deal with y'all own and make sure y'all own are in check, then the system that we need to create that's for everybody instead of the one that was created just for one group of people can then take a hold and we can move forward together. But it is going to take all of us. And you're right, Brandolyn, it's not our job to teach y'all. We are here expressing ourselves. And just like slaves had to learn how to navigate, and we've learned over the years and centuries how to navigate racism by being in a room and you not seeing us, because we learned that. That was something that we learned just listening. You'd be surprised how much you hear by just sitting there and people think that you don't belong, so they ignore you. And you learn so much. Learn. You're sitting here. Learn. Take this opportunity. Learn. Because that's exactly what we had to do. So no, we're not going to teach you. You hear what's happening. You hear people's heart being pulled out. People are very passionate about what they're saying and being expressive about what's going on. That's real. Don't get up and go, "Whoo, that was deep. I'm glad," and then go get a glass of wine and don't do nothing else. Your turn, your charge, on you. What are you going to do about it? Thank you.
LaTanya, so much truth this evening. Oh my gosh, so much truth. All right, we're gonna go. I see 3 people's hands up, and then we're gonna close out. So I'm gonna go with Khadijah, Liz, and then Eddie, and then we're gonna close out. So Khadijah.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to say this. I'm a social worker in a dialysis setting. I'm originally from Africa with heavy accent than most of you, darker pigmentation than most, and I'm a Muslim. However, I don't let all this stand on my way to get things done. It doesn't mean I don't go through obstacles of racism from both my white and Black brothers and sisters. I do very much so go through the same obstacle as all of you. And I'm reminded of this fact every day because I live in a small rural community with majority of whites. I'm the only Black social worker at my workplace. So majority of the time, there's so many things that I try to bring forward that doesn't even get done. What I can say is, what was said to African nation by European Union, if you don't have something you are bringing on the table, nobody wants to hear your outcry. With that said, let's pull the chairs and sit ourselves at the table like the other folks have said, and demand change for ourselves. We need to demand better advocacy for ourselves. Let's advocate for better pay for the field of social workers, better work environment, and to be treated with respect and dignity. Because this is lacking so much so in social work profession. I'm working with technicians who even don't have associate's degree. They've gone to only to high school, some of them. And they get paid with their overtime, sometimes more than the social workers with a master's degree. That doesn't make sense to me. Now, the field of social workers comes from the heart. If people don't have it in their heart, it's really not a profession for everybody. So if the School of Social Worker is not tying those knots and making sure the people who get in are really the right people for this profession, we're going to have this problem over and over and over again. The Board of Social Workers also needs to be involved in making the changes. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Cecily,
who's the next?
Out. So
It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so I know we're going to finish up with Eddie.
Yes, so I just wanted to piggyback off of Tangela and then David, because I think it's really important for us to address understanding, right, like what is pigmentocracy, color currency, and colorism. And in my opinion, that is exactly where racism will evolve into. Why? Of all of the predominantly Black and brown countries I visited, for example, like Cuba, the majority of people who are in that country are my complexion and darker. But who is treated like a white person? Me. Okay, so I want to quote something that my colleague Atiya Raja said, and it's something to keep it in the minds as we do this work, which is the closer we get to Black liberation, the more non-Black people of color will be folded into the privilege of whiteness. Sit with that for a moment while I plug in my computer because she says she's about to die. So thinking about that, right? We see the indoctrination of non-Black people of color into whiteness all the time. It has happened with Italian people, with Irish people, with, and even within our own spaces, in conversations in Black and brown communities, we talk about even how white Jewish people have been indoctrinated into the privilege of whiteness, right? But there are Black Jewish people who are not treated in the same way. So we have to continue to challenge that. But what I think we are seeing, and this kind of goes to Tangela's point, is we're seeing the paradox of Afro-diasporic Blackness and the trauma that Willie Lynch left on us when he said that the indoor Negroes and the field Negroes, right? So how has that continued to perpetuate in these systems? So also, when we're thinking about that, right? When we're thinking about our privilege and color currency, the most important work must be done by those who benefit the most from white privilege and white oppressorship. So yes, as someone who is lighter in complexion, I have the privilege to speak it up and won't be seen as aggressive as somebody who's darker than me. However, we have to continue to maintain cognizant of, again, how much space we take up, because what we do have is a community issue. And for my white counterparts who are listening and want to understand more about conditional allyship, there's a difference between a community issue, which is what we see within Black and brown spaces of colorism, like dark Black folk who are angry at lighter Black folk because for years they had a brown paper bag test just to get into certain spaces, is real. And when we are told, if you're lighter on the spectrum, you're not Black enough to do this work, those feelings that we have of, distress are not our darker skin complexions feelings to bear. That's not their burden to bear. So when those things come up, we have to not censor that discomfort and just remember that, okay, you're right. You have a right to feel like you're not being heard, because ultimately what I know is you're going to be erased when they censor me and how I look, which is why the Afro-Latin movement is slowly dying out, because Black Latin people have been erased by those who look like Sofia Vergara and J-Lo. Okay, so the last thing, is to also think about, like, in addressing that, we have to get to a point where we're not policing Blackness either. So we know that there is, at least I will say, there is a difference between being Black and being an Afro-descendant. And I think that's where things get convoluted, because a lot of Latin people want to say, I'm Black, my ancestors were Black, and even though I look like Donald Trump, I'm Black. However, Blackness is a constant. When you enter a space, you are automatically seen as such, and you are treated as such, and you are devalued as such. So be cognizant that if you have to pull out your genetic DNA card or your ancestry results to prove how Black you are, you really need to sit with yourself and see that you might not be Black in presentation, and you can still identify with your Blackness. There's nothing wrong with that, but know how much space you take up so that you're not eradicating Black people from their own movements.
Drop the mic. So thank you. We're finishing up here. I am so full. I have had so much to think about. I want to just thank you all for just pouring your hearts out. And for those of you that stayed on with us to this hour, we talked about a lot. I heard a lot of complex issues around racism, internal racism, I mean, it's very, very complex. It's very, very complex. And I want to thank you all for just staying with us and having these difficult conversations. And so that's all I have to say. I'm tapped out. But you know, it's been so rich, and I want you to know that at NASW, New York State, all of this information, everything that we're hearing tonight is being collated, and we are going to be, you know, working together, hopefully working in partnership, developing, you know, working groups in order to take this to the next step. It's not just talk. It really isn't. We're working towards action, and we're hoping that, you know, that this is going to be something that we're going to be able to continue to work towards, you know, changing our profession, because, you know, our clients, our communities are demanding this. We're demanding it. And so I want to thank you all tonight.
I just want to jump in. Thank everyone for coming. A huge, unbelievable thank you to Caroline and Cecily. Give them huge claps for their facilitating. They are part of our Revolutionize Leadership Team, as is Taj, who has been monitoring. I see you down there, Taj. Say hey so people can see you. Who is our wonderful intern and also part of our Revolutionize Leadership Team. She has been watching our Facebook Live and reporting back to us. And I want to thank Amelia. Amelia is the one who came up with our wonderful graphic that grabbed everyone's attention and our messaging. So thank you, Amelia. And Caroline's not lying. We are starting the School of Social Work action groups soon, couple of weeks. We have been meeting, the Revolutionize Leadership Team has been meeting. We are ready to go. We're meeting one more time on Monday, and then we're reaching out to our BIPOC volunteers who want to lead those work groups, and then we'll get white people that can sit behind BIPOC people who are leading the groups. So keep joining us. Number 8 town hall is February 23rd. We've been putting the links in the side so you can sign up now. You can watch all of our former town halls. We're committed to this change. Stay on this journey with us. We need you. All your voices are incredibly important. This is data. Everything that happened tonight is data. We're taking this to create the goals. Your stories are power, your voice is power, and your voice and your stories are going to be what changes this profession. So thank you. Have a wonderful night, and we will see.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you from Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
I just want to say thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
I'm definitely going to bring this back.